Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name's Ann Morgan, and I'm the chair of the Toronto Police Services Board. I would like to welcome you all to this hybrid meeting of the board. We acknowledge that the land that we are on as we hold this meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit and Métis people. The board also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties, also signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. At this point, I'm going to ask, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, let me proceed. And I will turn the board's executive director, Dr. Doobie Cannon-Gisser, who will go over the meeting's logistics.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to everyone who has joined us in person, as well as those who have called into this meeting. Please note that this meeting is also being live streamed on the Toronto Police YouTube account, and will be available there at the conclusion of this meeting. Joining us in person, we have Acting Vice Chair Elisa Kostakis, Member Nick Migliori, I believe we're still awaiting Deputy Mayor Amber Morley, and Councillor Lily Cheng, and joining us virtually is Member Nadine Spencer. We also have members of our board office staff, Chief Demkew, his command team, members of the service, and of course members of the public. We have individuals who have registered to make deputations both in person as well as virtually on our agenda items, and as per our regular meeting process, deputations will be heard prior to the item being discussed and voted on by board members. When it comes time to do a deputation, those who have registered will be called upon or brought into the meeting by our colleague Danielle Dowdy. And as always, deputants will speak, followed by an opportunity for board members to ask them questions. Chair.
Thank you. At this point, I see we're still waiting for Deputy Mayor Amber Morley. I just wanted to say a few words about her. And also, she has been sworn in previously, but we were going to do the ceremonial portion. So having said that, perhaps we can just wait to do that portion. I will hold that down, and I'll now turn the meeting over to Diana Akeem, our board.
Can we do it when she gets here?
Do we need
The election?
Okay.
Yeah, we can hold that item down.
All right.
The agenda.
All right. We will then move to going through the agenda. Firstly, is the confirmation of the minutes from the regular public meeting. We do have a deputation for Mr. Langenfeld, so we'll hold that down. The chief will give his monthly update. We will hold that down. There is a presentation from the Internet Child Exploitation Unit with regard to giving a presentation, badge to Dog Blue, and we'll hold that down. Number 4 item is, there does not appear to be any deputations on this matter. It's a September 14th memo from Chief of Police, Chief Demke, and a request to extend the term of the 911 crisis call diversion pilot project. Can I have a motion? All right. Next, agenda item number 5 is again a memo, a report from Chief Demke as it relates to a contract award to Covalence Consulting, which is related to our major case management system, and we do have a deputation. Item number 6, also a report from Chief Demke about Envirox Analytics. It's a contract increase, and we have a deputation. Item 7 are the budget variance report, and we have several deputations on that matter. Item number 8 is a report from Dr. Cannon-Gisser, and with respect to council, the City Council decision declaring gender-based violence and intimate partner violence an epidemic in the City of Toronto. May I have a motion to approve? Okay. All right. Just a moment. Thank you. Item number 9 is appointments of special constables. It's the September 2023 report, and we have a deputation, so we'll hold that down. Item number 10, again, is a report from Dr. Cannon-Gisser. It is the semi-annual report. It's the special fund unaudited statement from January to June of this year. May I have a motion on this matter? Outlined, there is simply not a change in the report, but a change in language. And there is in that report a line item that says National Aboriginal Day, and we would like to update in that report to read National Indigenous People Day.
Sorry, I'd like to hold.
Next item is the Chief's, number 11, Chief's Administrative Investigative Reports. Items 11.1 through to 11.6. I wonder if I could have a motion. Member Kostakis, can I have a seconder? Member Migliori, all in favor? Appears none opposed. That's received. All right. Thank you. Okay, so we'll do Andrew first. Okay. Yes. Oh, welcome. Maybe as a counselor you can fix the traffic, but and we welcome you, Deputy Mayor Amber Morley, to our board. Just a little background on Deputy Mayor Morley. She represents Ward 3, which is the Etobicoke Lakeshore, on Toronto City Council after being elected in 2022. In August 2023, Councillor Morley is now named Deputy Mayor representing the area of Etobicoke. For over 20 years, Deputy Mayor Morley has been working on behalf of the residents of Etobicoke Lakeshore while pursuing advocacy at all levels of government. As the director of the South Etobicoke Youth Assembly of LAMP, CHC, Deputy Mayor Morley organized, advocated, and fought alongside local young people to advance the needs and aspirations of peers and neighbors in her community. She's effectively and consistently used her voice to bring attention to such issues as poverty reduction, youth equity, good governance, and access to city spaces and services. We're very happy to have you, Deputy Morley, because you have so many vast and diverse experiences that complement the rest of us on the board. And you are clearly so committed to meaningfully work with communities here in Toronto so we can engage all the voices of Torontonians in the oversight of policing, which is obviously a crucial part of our governance. Should just like to say that Deputy Mayor Morley was previously sworn in by myself on August 24th in order for her to immediately take on duties as a board member. And today we're going to just recreate that in a moment. I should also note alongside that, as well as Deputy Mayor Morley, City Council also appointed Councillor John Burnside to the board. Like Deputy Mayor Morley, Councillor Burnside was also sworn in on August 21st in order for him to immediately take on duties. He could not join us today because he had a previously scheduled commitment before his appointment to the board, and he will be publicly sworn in at the next meeting, and we look forward to having him. And before I conduct the swearing in of Deputy Mayor Morley, I'd like to thank our departing board members. The board owes a great debt of gratitude to both Councillor Nunziata and Councillor Crisanti for their professionalism, diligence, and insight. We appreciate Councillor Nunziata's tireless advocacy in pursuit of making life better and safer for Torontonians, and the very important role she's played in police oversight as vice chair of the board. Councillor Crisanti also is a committed board member who sought to provide effective governance while ensuring service members are recognized for the vital work they do every day. And we thank them for their excellent service. So at this point, we'll probably go up to the front, just Deputy Mayor Morley, and do your swearing in. Deputy Mayor Morley, can you hear me? Is this mic working? Okay, thanks. The first oath is the oath of office. Repeat after me, Deputy Mayor Morley. I solemnly swear that I will be loyal to His Majesty the King and to Canada.
I solemnly swear that I will be loyal to His Majesty the King and to Canada,
And that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada.
and that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada,
And that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge my duties
and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge my duties
as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board,
as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board,
faithfully, impartially, and according to the Police Services Act.
faithfully, impartially, and according to the Police Services Act.
So help me God.
So help me God.
I solemnly swear I will not disclose any information obtained by me in the course of my duties
I solemnly swear that I will not disclose any information obtained by me in the course of my duties
as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board,
as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board,
except as I may be authorized or required by law.
except as I may be authorized or required by law.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Welcome, Deputy Mayor Morley.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, there is. Okay. Thank you. And before we move to the election of the vice chair, Ms. Hakeem, our board administrator, has advised me we have a deputation. Is Derek?
For me in this matter, and directed to nominate Lisa Kostakis as its next vice chair, as there is no one more deserving than her to have this position. When Councillor Cheng here was being bullied recently for asking too many questions, and that meeting went completely off the rails with the decision made by the illegal chair at the time, 2 hours into the meeting, to arbitrarily switch over to using the Chapter 27 procedures used by Toronto City Council as a blatant attempt to prevent her from asking any more questions. When seemingly told to approve the illegal motion to do this, Lisa simply shook her head and said no. The Supreme Court of Canada in 2000 said in the City of Nanaimo versus Rascal Trucking, neither experience nor proficiency in municipal law and municipal planning, while desirable, is required to be elected a councillor. Given the relatively broad range of issues that a municipality must address, it is unlikely that most councillors will develop such special expertise even over an extended time. So on that, and especially after the humiliating way Miguel was treated last week at City Council, I object to anyone from the Corporation of the City of Toronto holding this position, as it is not in the public's interest to have anyone from this Roman municipal civil law jurisdiction that continually defrauds the public with their corporate bylaws and thumbs their nose at the common law. The common law, by the way, which the SIU director mentions at the very bottom in one of the administrative inquiry items on this agenda. In the immortal words of Billy Madison's principle, we are all now dumber for having listened to anything Councillor Nunziata had to say here. I award her no points, and may God have mercy on her soul. Also, the Supreme Court of Canada said in the Committee for the Commonwealth of Canada versus Canada in 1991, expression in a municipal council chamber would be protected because expression is not incompatible with the function of the council chamber. It could be argued, for example, that the parliamentary library could function quite well despite the presence of demonstrators holding placards. It went on to say that it is likely that wearing a t-shirt, right? Miguel was kicked out of City Council for wearing a t-shirt by the lady that you so glowingly said thank you for all her whatever she contributed here, by the way. It is likely that wearing a t-shirt bearing a political message would be a form of expression consistent with the intended purpose of such a place. In R versus Keegstra, 1990, Supreme Court of Canada said, as this court has repeatedly affirmed, the content of a statement cannot deprive it of the protection accorded by Section 2B, no matter how offensive it may be. The content of Mr. Keegstra's statements was offensive and demeaning in the extreme. Nevertheless, on the principles affirmed by this court, that alone would appear not to deprive them of the protection guaranteed by the Charter. This is from Bracken versus Regional Municipality of Niagara Corporation, 2015, where the Superior Court of Justice said, the region also concedes that the council chambers are public property, which the applicant is entitled to use in exercise of his right to freedom of expression, unless that right seriously interferes, which Miguel did not do last week, with the use of the public property by the city or other individuals. This is Bracken versus Niagara Parks Police, 2018. The application judge erred in finding that Section 29A does not infringe Section 2B of the Charter. Mr. Bracken stood in Grandview Plaza in Niagara Parks holding a sign reading, Trump is right, fuck China, fuck Mexico. To take a familiar example from U.S. First Amendment case law, the meaning conveyed by shouting fuck the draft does not translate without significant loss of meaning to the quiet declaration that I am implacably opposed to the draft. That's from Cohen versus California in 1971. This is the most important point, so this doesn't happen to anyone else, what happened to Miguel down at City Hall again. Abusive or insulting language has expressive content. And I wouldn't normally come here and say the F word, I don't feel the need to, but Miguel literally does not have that word printed on his shirt. There's a red maple leaf replacing the U. Nonetheless, he was still kicked out on the basis by, again, Councillor Nunziata, because in council chambers, supposedly, there is no advertising allowed on someone wearing a t-shirt, which is the most cockamamie thing I've ever heard, and good riddance to her.
Thank you. I take it there were no questions? Thank you. And now I will turn over the meeting to Diana Akeem, our board administrator, for the election of the vice chair. And thank you, Chief. We just, normally you would have given your monthly update. This is just a matter we were hoping we could deal with expeditiously. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. In accordance with the board's procedural bylaw, we will now hold an election for the position of vice chair. Nominations for this position to serve for the rest of the calendar year 2023 and until the next election of the board will now be accepted. May I please have a nomination?
I nominate for vice chair board member Lisa Kostakis.
Thank you so much, Chair Morgan. Chair Morgan nominates board member Lisa Kostakis. Do I have any further nominations? Oh, you seconded? Thank you so much. Any further nominations for this position? No? Thank you. Ms. Kostakis, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Thank you. Nominations for the position of vice chair for the remainder of 2023 are now closed. Chair Morgan nominated Ms. Kostakis, which was seconded by board member Nick Migliori. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. The nomination therefore carries unanimously. There being only one nomination for the position of vice chair, Ms. Kostakis is elected as the vice chair of the board for the remainder of the calendar year and until the next election of the board. Congratulations, Vice Chair Kostakis.
Thank you. At this point, I will turn the meeting over to the chief for his monthly update.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'd certainly like to start by recognizing our most recent additions to the board, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Amber Morley and Councillor John Burnside. Congratulations on the appointment. I truly have to tell you, I look forward to working with you and with Councillor Burnside as we continue to deliver on our service priorities and our overarching commitment to doing whatever we can to keep Toronto the best and safest place to live, work, and play. Throughout my entire time working closely with the board, I've come to learn over the years that being a board member of the Toronto Police Service Board is not an easy role. It is an immersive position that requires a significant commitment. And at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason, and that's community safety and well-being. I commit personally to working with you both, to always being available and to assisting you in any way I possibly can as you settle into this new role. This is a commitment I've extended to the entire board and to board staff. And while I welcome the arrival of our newest board members, I want to also pause and recognize the contributions of our departing members. It's been an honor to work with Councillor Francis Nunziata, Councillor Vincent Crisanti during their tenure as members of the Toronto Police Services Board. Speaking as a resident of our great city, I am forever grateful for their commitment to supporting our efforts to keeping our community safe while also challenging the status quo. Through their passion and care for our city, we have had healthy discussions and debates that ultimately benefit the members from communities from across the city. Our city, our police service, and the board is in a better place because of their civic engagement, and I'd like to thank both of them for all that they have done. I'm sure that, if I hope they're watching, I'm sure that our paths will continue to cross through our work in the city and the work we do together on behalf of all communities. I wish both of you nothing but the best in the future. As we have updated you, members of the board, at previous board meetings, through collaboration with the OIPRD, our service implemented a number of recommendations and modified our approach to what is called dynamic entries during the execution of search warrants. I wanted to briefly acknowledge some incredibly encouraging remarks on our efforts in this regard made recently by OIPRD Director Stephen Leach. In a letter from August 17th, 2023, OIPRD Director Leach wrote, quote, I am pleased to advise that the Toronto Police Service Procedure 02-18, known as executing a search warrant, reflects the intentions and goals of the OIPRD's notification and more closely aligns with the current case law. I commend the Toronto Police Service's commitment to reviewing and revising its policies and training, and I'm confident that these revisions and proposed trainings will be steps towards enhancing public confidence in police. As many other police services have already started reviewing and revising their procedure, I recommend that they consider adopting the Toronto Police Service Procedure in accordance with their specific context and operational needs. Close quote. I would like to thank Director Leach for his acknowledgement of the work completed in this area by our service, and I'd like to thank the OIPRD for their collaboration and guidance. It is partnerships such as this that directly benefit our communities through providing opportunities for reflection, for dialogue, and ultimately positive changes to the way we conduct ourselves as a police service. On August 29th, 2023, I was joined by my fellow command officers, along with members of the Police Service Board, including then Acting Chair Lisa Kostakis, at the grand opening of the service's East Wellness Center. Through the decentralization of wellness supports and services, the hope is that barriers to members accessing the supports they need will be reduced, if not eliminated. At the East Wellness Center, members of the service can receive tailored support and the resources they need to address the unique challenges they face. While the East Wellness Center is the first of the decentralized spaces to open, it will not be the last. In time, other centers will open in strategic locations across the city to ensure that it is easy and convenient for every member to access the resources they need when they need it in a private setting. I'm happy that our approach to mental health today is a lot different than it was even just a few years ago, and certainly much different than when I started in this career. While much work has been done and many positive changes have resulted, we all recognize that the stigma around mental health, particularly in the policing community, is a narrative that we must continue to acknowledge exists, while also taking steps to understand and address the stigma and ensuring that we are doing everything we can to support those around us that may be struggling to cope. I can confidently say that the command team and I, together with our board, have committed to making the mental health of all service members a priority. The team that comprises our wellness unit works tirelessly, giving all of themselves to support our members' health, safety, and well-being. This team of wellness experts provides support to our members in the areas of critical incident response, occupational health and safety, workplace accommodation, and mental health support. With the creation of a decentralized model for accessing wellness supports through the establishment of regional wellness centers, our outreach to even more members will be that much greater. Here in Toronto, we are lucky that we have resources that complement the important work that is done by our wellness unit. Toronto Beyond the Blue is an amazing example of an organization that is dedicated to providing supports to not only our members, but their families as well. This very evening, I'll be attending the Canada Beyond the Blue Gala, in which I am honored to not only attend, but to be able to speak at. At tonight's event, members of the policing community will be recognized for their commitment to improving the well-being of others and for their commitment to changing the narrative that I mentioned earlier, and that unfortunately can be a barrier to someone seeking help. While individuals will be recognized for their incredible humanitarian work, my hope is that we will also raise awareness for both Toronto Beyond the Blue and Canada Beyond the Blue, two organizations that are impactful and make a difference in the lives of members every single day. As Chief, I'm incredibly grateful for the support these organizations provide our members, and I know that the board is also appreciative and thankful for the work of both Toronto and Canada Beyond the Blue. On Sunday, September 24th, the 46th Annual Canadian Police and Peace Officers Memorial Service will be held in Ottawa. This year, once again, the lives of too many brave men and women will be honored, including our own Police Constable Andrew Hong. Just 2 days ago, on September 12th, we marked the one-year anniversary of the tragic and senseless murder of Police Constable Andrew Hong, who was participating in a joint motorcycle training exercise with Peel police officers when he was killed in the line of duty. This tragic event shook not only the Toronto Police Service and their family members, but the community as a whole. Constable Hong was a well-respected, dedicated, and proud member of our police service. He served our city with pride and selflessly protected our communities for 22 years. A dedicated husband and a proud father of 2 children. Constable Hong will always be remembered for his kindness and generosity. A hero in life, not death. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. At this point, I'd like to turn over this meeting to the Internet Child Exploitation Unit of Toronto Police. I understand there's a presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, members of the board, members of the service, and the public. This morning we're neither is out. There we go. We got it. Okay, thank you very much. Pardon me? Thank you. I'll try that again.
It's on red right there.
Oh, I was looking for the light here.
No, the light's up there.
All right. Good morning, Chair, members of the board, members of the service, and members of the public. This morning we're here to introduce a new member of our service, and if we could get Detective VJ Shetty and Blue up.
The red is here.
Would mind come to the front? Yeah.
Ducky.
Good? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Operation Underground Railroad, which is otherwise known by the acronym OUR, O-U-R, has donated an electronic storage device canine, which we've named Blue, to the service. This includes the training and equipment for a total donation of approximately $28,000. OUR is a registered charity in the United States with a mission of combating online child sex abuse and child sex trafficking through private donations. OUR provides support to law enforcement agencies by way of training through technology and electronic storage device detection canines. OUR's motivation for the donation is to assist child exploitation units with their investigations and the well-being of involved victims and witnesses. A member of the Toronto Police Service, Detective VJ Shetty, of the Internet Child Exploitation Unit, otherwise known as ICE, attended Indianapolis for 2 weeks of training in August and certification of Canine Dog Blue. Canine Blue is now part of the ICE unit and will serve the functions of an ESD canine as well as the therapy support canine to the unit. This is a very special addition to our service, and while we value all our service animals, this is something we truly have never had before, had the opportunity to use. So we're very excited about this. With the addition of Canine Blue in the ICE unit, another layer of mental health support is also provided to the investigators to help limit the effects of the exposure to the material that they are exposed to as a result of the type of investigations that they conduct. ICE is a unit that is part of the Sex Crimes Unit operating under Detective Operations as part of Specialized Operations Command and led by Unit Commander Inspector Susan Gomes. Canine Blue will assist the ICE unit to search for electronic devices at search warrants more efficiently, as well as support victim, witnesses, and members of the unit. The core mandate of the ICE unit is to identify, locate, and rescue victims of child sexual abuse through the investigation of persons who possess, access, make, and/or distribute child sexual abuse material over the internet. ICE investigators gather electronic evidence from the homes and businesses of suspects through the execution of search warrants. Electronic storage devices can range from large external hard drives to very small micro SD cards. These devices are easily concealed and very difficult to locate. Canine Blue can assist the ICE unit to search more efficiently for these type of devices. And I'm very happy to tell you that since her arrival at the Toronto Police Service, Blue has had the opportunity to assist the investigators with criminal code search warrants in regards to child sexual abuse material. And during one such search, Blue located a hidden cell phone as well as some memory cards. The Toronto Police Service is a leader in the field of ICE investigations and has seized the opportunity to be at the forefront in deploying this technique, thereby continuing our service commitment to delivering innovative policing services to our communities. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the Chief, who's going to make a special presentation.
Of course, Chief.
See how the training works.
Dougie's tired. What a perfect shot. Hey, look at the
And before the ICE unit leaves, I want to thank you all personally. It wasn't my area of expertise as a previous prosecutor, but I did take a week-long course, and I did do quite a bit of warrants, but not the kind of work you do. So I want to thank you for your courage, stamina, diligence, and your mission, which is to save children. And it's one of the darkest areas of police investigation. So honestly, you do God's work, and I do recognize and I truly thank you because it makes the world a better place. Thank you. So at this point, may I have a motion to receive this presentation? Lisa, and seconded by Amber. Thank you. And the next matter is a confirmation of the minutes, but we do have a deputation from Mr. Langenfeld. It's virtual.
Can you hear me? I'm actually on my phone as well. I was going to speak on the phone. Okay, I trust you can hear me. I'll just begin by noticing, I just noticed now the WebEx video feed and the YouTube video actually are different feeds. And so people are actually seeing different things depending on where they're watching. I'd like to suggest that people should be able to record the WebEx video feed if they're using it. And I see you have that turned on, off, I should say, disabled. I'd like to congratulate Vice Chair Kostakis and also welcome Deputy Mayor Morley. And I'd like to echo Derek's comments regarding Frances Nunziata, make note of her repeated breaches of the law governing policing and her incessant violation of charter rights of Canadians. Looking at this month's agenda first, before I get to last month's minutes here, at the bottom there, it mentions the special public meeting for budgets. And I'd like to ask what's special about Toronto Police having a budget next year. And of course, normal people might ask, well, why does it matter that it's a quote special meeting or a regular meeting? But one need only look at the January 7th, 2023 special budget meeting for the answer. Because that meeting was called special, the board actually kept secret the details of the budget. They withheld the 97-page agenda and the 1,000-odd pages of budget details until just 3.5 days before the special meeting. And when I made issue of that fact, the board's former executive director responded that doing so was justified because section 12.1 of the board's procedural bylaw permits the chair to call a special meeting of the board on only 24 hours notice. And so therefore I asked that the board actually specifically direct that the agenda for the September 25th meeting of the budget committee be published before end of day on Friday, September 15th. And by October 7th for the October 17th meeting, and by November 17th for the November 27th meeting, basically a week and a day before the meeting actually takes place. In fact, rather than this being a special meeting of the board, these are meetings of a committee of the board, a budget committee established under Minute P 2023-0727-8.0, item 8 on July's agenda, which actually raises other issues, including that the board may wish to appoint another member to the budget committee as a replacement for former board member Crisanti, who was named last month to that board. It also relates to the fact that there's nothing special about this meeting taking place. With regards to last month's minutes, I wanted to raise, you had, I believe it was on the professional and accountability item on that agenda that David Shelnut spoke and raised issues regarding a complaint by an individual and taking issue with the services response to that complaint and how it was dealt with. And in fact, Nunziata, again, no surprise, the problems start there, called up the board's lawyer, and that lawyer informed Mr. Shelmer, who's also somebody's counsel, that there was no option and no appeal. But of course, the Police Services Act states that the board is in fact the appellate body for decisions by the chief of police. And so, in fact, once again, we have that lawyer to the board giving false information to people. So I'd really also like to suggest that it's time for the board to get a new lawyer from Toronto City Legal. The current one has been there giving invalid legal advice for a number of years and has really taken this board down the rabbit hole. That's lots of the issues that we're seeing there. And so that is somewhere else where we need a change at this board. But I'd also like to suggest that the board look into this question of whether there isn't an appeal to the board regarding the decision from last month there where Mr. Shelnut was speaking about his client's situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld, and thank you for raising timeliness with respect to public input into the budget meetings. And on that note, Dr. Kanengisser is just going to say a few words of steps that have been taken to change the accessibility such that public members can give input before a special meeting is called on the budget particularly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just clarify that the term special meeting used in the agenda is an oversight of ours. These are committee meetings, and the materials will be published 5 business days in advance, similar to how we do it with regular board meetings. So the members of the public will have effectively 7 days to review those before the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanengisser. Unfortunately, the fact that it is named special meeting was the sort of that falls under the procedural bylaw. So I'd just like to recommend as well for future ones that the word special isn't used. So thank you, Bill.
Thank you. May I have a motion to receive the minutes from the July 27th, 2023? Vice Chair Kostakis, may I have a seconder? Member Migliore, all in favor? Thank you. The next item is item number 4. It's a report from Chief Demke. It's a request to extend the term of the 911 crisis call diversion pilot project, the Gerstein project. Councillor Cheng, you asked us to hold it down. You said you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this report, and I think it's really important to highlight that the police services is working on alternatives to frontline police answering calls that are would have other types of service be more appropriate. And I'm wondering, I think for some people it's confusing because we have several different things that are happening. We have TCCS, we have the mobile crisis intervention, and the Gerstein crisis call. And I wonder if someone could share what is the intersection between these 3 services? How are they working together to strengthen alternative responses?
So when you look at the 3 services, they do complement one another, but they are different as well. When you look at MCIT, I would say that that is different. When we look at Gerstein and TCCS, they truly are diversionary in the matter that the end goal is that police are not required to attend. When it comes to our MCIT, that's a situation where there's a police officer in the car, it is taking a police resource, and MCIT will always take a police resource, an officer attending that call and responding to that call. The end goal of Gerstein and TCCS is that police are not attending the call. The goal is that we're working towards reform, and the goal is that we're providing the right response, and that response is a community response. It's a crisis worker response, and not having the police attend. When you look at the differences between TCCS and Gerstein, the largest difference is that with our Gerstein project, we have a crisis worker in our comm center. So when that 911 call comes in, with having the Gerstein project, with the Gerstein pilot project, that comms operator has the opportunity, if it meets certain criteria, if it's nonviolent and non-emergent, there's the opportunity to send that call directly to the crisis worker is in the seat, available in the same room. Obviously, having that crisis worker in communications is a huge advantage to all of us. It's an advantage to our comms operators who can get to better understand. There's been a lot of cross-training between the crisis workers and our comms operators and call takers. So that's the big difference, is that for Gerstein, that's the crisis worker who's sitting in the seat in our comm center. The other difference is that Gerstein right now is service-wide, whereas our TCCS program is still rolling out. It's still growing. Right now, TCCS only services 56% of the city, 9 divisions, whereas our Gerstein project services all of the city.
And is there, because even with mobile crisis intervention, that's still also, I think, addressing mental health type challenges. So I'm wondering, is there any sharing of data between these 3 different projects?
Perhaps Staff Kelly can.
Hi, Councillor. Apologies. So I think the difference with TCCS and Gerstein, and just to give a little bit more context as well to show Gerstein's kind of connection with the mental health and crisis response in the city, is that they're co-located with us in our comms room, so they share data. So our CAD system is shared with theirs, so that data is shared immediately. There is no break of data. And Gerstein is also one of the community anchor partners for TCCS. So although they do that co-response for us in our comms room, they also are one of the community anchors employed by TCCS in our downtown core, and they do the outreach through 211 and through TCCS. So that's kind of how they're connected as well. They also have the benefit of the training. The staff have the benefit of the training that our comms operators would have on a smaller scale. So there's that as well. And we're working on integrating data with TCCS. Battery's dying. So we're working on the integration of data, but that's going to take some time. 2 very, very different systems. So working with TCCS and Find 211 to see if we can do that integration of data. But Gerstein already receives that data as they're co-located in our PSAP.
Right, because I see the story of the challenge of mental health in Toronto and as it relates to policing and frontline workers, and all 3 of these strands are taking pictures of what's happening. And so having a macroscopic view that brings in the data across all of these 3 would perhaps help us consolidate, because I think for the public it's challenging to understand which door is going to be offered to me, which one can I trust, which one is accessible. So, and I'm wondering, in this report it says that there's a decrease in staffing that has happened, and as a person working in the community, we also know mental health challenges are going up. So I'm just wondering why this reduction in this pilot.
In the staffing for Gerstein, I think that this is something that's probably faced citywide. I don't want to speak for a lot of community organizations, but I hear this in our discussions, and I know our new vice chair can speak to that, that there's a difficulty because of the type of work. So I think there's a retention issues that are happening. It's difficult work, and because of the fact that mental health crises are rising in their city, it's adding that extra pressure. And then when you're in a pilot phase, you also have to wonder about permanency of jobs, right? And money.
So reduction is a result of retention, not because a decision was made to reduce the workforce on?
Yeah, I think I
Yes,
just want to
100%.
put a fine point on this. It's not us reducing.
No,
It's not the service. This is Gerstein and their capacity to meet their operational needs.
So,
And if I may, Madam Chair, too.
Yeah, I
to
was
add-
going to say, Councillor Chang, we'll go around the room and let other people.
sure.
It's one sort of question
Sure. Yeah.
per board member, and then we can come back to you.
Sure, thank you.
Vice Chair Kostakis, you have-
It's just to touch on that as well, as that the nonprofit sector with the funding piece and also COVID, I mean, just a lot of funders had to cut some funding as well, so that capacity has lessened. So trust me when I tell you the nonprofit sector will come back to the city too to see how we can replenish all those pockets to address these issues. On that as well, and I hope they can, not just the differences. When we talk about commonalities, we're not talking about duplication of services, and being part of those from the community as well in the consultations of all of these projects from the beginning, when they first began, when we were part of the consultations from the nonprofit sector and other stakeholders in the communities and our community members. they serve a different purpose in a sense of what their phases are, and also in meeting volume demand of all of the issues that you're talking about as well, when we talk about the collaboration, partnerships, and I always say this, and then integrated services. So, and it's not the services where the public is out there to say, I can access directly. They are part of a service that is then comes from referrals and other supports that come from the different focus tables, also from different agencies that are aware of these services in working together. And the TCCSS is fairly new as well, as when we had our presentation from Denise and Scott as well, that everyone's in a different phase, but it's also to fill different gaps within the gaps that are also out there that our communities need, whether it's mental health and otherwise, because they're very, very complex situations. So I think there's the uniqueness of each service, but it's also an evolution part of all of them coming to a point where they can service the volume demand and the complexity of what's happening, if that makes any, sorry.
Chair, can I clarify something for the councillor that might assist?
Yes, please, Super.
Councillor Chang. So hopefully this provides some clarity. So MCIT is involved in a response with the nurse and a police officer that are emergent and violent, things that our co-responders can't do. Mm-hmm. So there will always be a place for them separately. And then, of course, there's a place for the community response. So the Gerstein 911 Crisis Call Diversion Project, they're handling that on the calls as well. So even though we have 1,521 in the first year and then 2,000 that get diverted to them, there are instances where they stay on the line and they provide that comfort and that service until our officers get there. So they also have that additional use, and then TCCS is going out when someone has accepted them and given that consent, so that it's only a community response. So there are three very different parts of the mental health response, and I think they're all very, very necessary. So again, speaking about at macroscopic level, CAMH-PSSP has done a review of the TCCS. They're just starting a review for us on the 911 crisis call diversion, and they've asked us to look at all of it, at MCIT, our PRU, our TCCS, and our Gerstein, so that we can have, and this is going to take a lot longer, but I think it's going to give us that answer that you were looking for, and are we doing this well, and where can we improve?
Thank you, Staff Superintendent. Were there any other questions? Deputy Mayor Morley?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Excited to see this work is underway, and of course, I think it's a direction that we're looking to continue as a city with all of the additional initiatives that Councillor Chang flagged, and also wanting to make sure we're getting, the most from our police service members, as well as supporting them with wraparound in terms of community contributions as well. I note that this pilot was initially started in 2021, and it's been extended a few times. I am just curious, because the report is light on data. We're talking a little bit about data and obviously the importance of that to drive informed decisions. Other than the 117 events that were diverted from the first initial phase of the project, I'm curious if we can expect additional information about the specifics of how this program is working and sort of what some of that data looks like related to the pilot.
Yeah, absolutely. I have some of that data in a very, very high level for year one and year two, and I can provide some of what that diversion number looks like. And we can dive deeper as well and provide a report maybe on next month for the board.
Wonderful. That would be helpful. I
Absolutely.
think that's the biggest benefit of a pilot, is really being able to analyze it appropriately and make appropriate decisions going forward. So I welcome that information, and we'll follow up accordingly. Just one quick follow-up, if I may. Again, noting when this initially started and understanding there's been some successes around it, despite some of the challenges with respect to resources and staff retention. What do we anticipate in terms of moving towards permanency here? How long do we see this as continuing as a pilot versus us moving into more of a permanent nature and operationalizing this full time?
That's an amazing question. And I think to put it in context, first of all, is to make clear that the service is committed. We're working very closely with SDFA and other similar complementary work to ensure that the suite of care available to our residents is as comprehensive as it can be. And this space has been evolving over the last couple of years very quickly within the service. But to be clear, MCIT, we've been doing for many, many, many years. This is not new for the Toronto Police. The Toronto Police has been alternative service delivery models advanced for many, many years before the most recent, evolution of what we now call SafeTO and the basket of work that exists in our community safety well-being plan. So we are here today for an extension. That's going to allow us time to have an evaluation to coincide with work happening as it relates to the SafeTO and the efforts in that space. For crisis response. So I think we're at the stage where all of this will have some element of permanency once we figure out how to do it together with all of our stakeholders. So we are really at that unique time in this kind of change management model of needing to do a deep evaluation with our work and efforts within the city to then bring it all together in a harmonized approach.
Very helpful response and encouraging. Thank you, Chief.
So we have another.
Councillor Chang?
Great. So just to clarify, who funds Gerstein right now? Is it our budget or Toronto Police Service budget, or is it a not-for-profit that's funding it?
So our involvement with Gerstein, we fund it through our modernization reserve. We have money set aside for this year and next year to continue the pilot.
So it's not decreasing because not-for-profits are shrinking their budgets? Because that was what I just heard.
So we will continue funding based on the actuals and based on their staffing levels. That comes from the Toronto Police operating budget.
And if I can clarify, what I meant with that is that beyond that, if it turns into referrals and there's capacity at the other, so Gernstein's may take something on afterwards for them, but also referrals to other agencies when it becomes a caseload as opposed to that immediate, addressing it immediately for that purpose.
And is that being, that data is also available, the referrals that are made, how many follow through with those referrals?
Yes, for TCCS response?
No, for Gerstein.
Yes, I have that here. I can give it verbally if you want to hear for year 1 or 2, a high level, okay? So the first year of the pilot's 1,521 events, those are from our persons in crisis that are in scope. So it's during the, where they're available, the times that they are available during the first year, which expanded in year 2. So 1,521 events went over, or the caller was asked if they would be willing. 1,000 of those events went to the pilot. 442 event callers declined. Once they got there, they wanted a police response, which will happen in crisis. So 612 events that went over that were in scope during the time they were available. So it's about a 67% for first year diversion rate. And for the second year, this is when they moved to 24/7. The operations moved, so we'll see a bit of an uptake. So there were 1,928 events that were in scope. 1,558 events were sent to the pilot. 370 callers declined. So 1,006 events were successfully diverted, so a 65% diversion rate based on calls that were in scope. Hope that helps a bit, but we can provide that in more detail.
And is there data on how many of the 1,006 were referred to other community organizations for follow-up?
Yeah. So it's coming from Gerstein, but it's not us that have it at this stage because it gets passed off.
Okay, great. So, yeah, I would like to request a briefing on more of this because I think it's so important for the board, and so I have a motion.
Okay.
Yeah, no. So to approve the extension of the pilot until the end of the year, to authorize the chair to execute all documents required to facilitate the extension, and then to request a report to the board with an interim evaluation of the 911 CCD pilot.
Yeah, is that okay?
Chair, if, protocol-wise, I'd like an opportunity to actually speak to that before you move the motion, if I may. We are asking for a 1-year extension. The 3-month extension is considerably going to make this ineffective. There's a real concern. First of all, Gerstein, we talked about their staffing and need to hire. Their capacity to hire with a 3-month extension will be non-existent practically. We do need a 1-year extension for that to be realistic. We're also embarking with an evaluation process that is not realistically going to be done by CAMH in the next 2-3 months to meet that kind of deadline. So I really would caution on number 1 as to being limited from our 1-year request, because a limitation of that nature will effectively make this not viable, I would suggest, moving forward. So I please ask the board to reconsider number 1 as it relates to the not giving us the 1-year extension we're asking for.
Yeah, while I was hearing the discussion, it struck me as, for example, questions on the memorandum of understanding who pays for Gerstein and those kind of things. Those materials are readily available. So rather than have this motion, what I would suggest is that we work with Staff Superintendent Skinner. We make available the materials that you need. And as the chief said, there are other assessments going on in the community, and if we don't have this, board approval to extend this good work, we're not really going to get the kind of data that will assist us in deciding whether or not this is a permanent way of doing service delivery. So I think we can accomplish both, because I do understand your concerns and what is the value added in a pilot project, but I think Staff Superintendent Skinner did give you some high level, but there is, since this project's inception, there is data to show a very definite upward trend, and the upward trend takes a long time. The numbers started out as very small just because of, from what I understand, the community really has to understand that this is available, what suits their needs. Some people still want the police where maybe they don't really need them, and they could be accommodated, but that's an education piece. So that would be my suggestion, and the board commits along with Staff Superintendent Skinner. We will get you the materials that you need, but the deadline also restricts the extension of the work that is going to collect all this data to decide. Councillor Morley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if I could offer a friendly amendment to the motion to include number 1 to extend for the year that's requested. But I do think it's important that we have the specific request around the details and the interim evaluation of the pilot, and that be publicly available as well, or public facing as part of this process. So I would offer that friendly amendment, and I would offer to second the motion.
I appreciate that, Deputy Mayor Morley, because I think that is much more workable, and we have to be realistic, and all this good work's going on in the community, but we can't compel CAMH to come up with their assessment sooner. So we will, if you give us a minute, Ms. Akeem will... Chief, is that okay?
Is that the year calendar date? Is that the calendar date we need? I was just checking to see.
Yep, September 30th.
That's the calendar date we need?
That's
Okay.
the original
So I just wanted to confirm the detail. Thank you.
And I'll second the motion
Thank you.
from Councillor Amber.
Thank you. And therefore, I take it that with Deputy Mayor Morley making the motion and seconding it, all in favor? Any opposed? So I take it we've dealt with item number 4. We have now approved it. Thank you. Appreciate, Chief, all your elaboration in helping us understand this. Oh, I thought the motion was enough. Yes. And I take it we approve that item. Thank you. The next item is item number 5. It's a report from Chief Demkew. It's the contract award to Covalence Consulting, and it's for the contract that deals with our major case management, our VICLAS system. I understand we have a deputation. It's Mr. Langenfeld.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Langenfeld. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So this is for to have a new software developed to replace the in-house system. And I note in the background, in the final paragraph in the middle of that, it says other police services enter their cases into a spreadsheet manually. However, this method is not a viable option for the service, and that's certainly understandable given the size of the Toronto Police Service and the number of cases that they're dealing with. But I note that everybody else is basically doing this on a spreadsheet. So we're talking about something slightly more robust than a spreadsheet, but certainly not a major application that we'd be talking about in other circumstances. So going on to the next section here, the service need of the Chief's report, it says this is needed because of the soon-to-be decommissioned technical component Adobe Flash. And in fact, Adobe Flash stopped being supported on December 31st, 2020. And their website says, and they blocked Flash content from running on Flash Player beginning January 12th, 2021. So we're looking at, in fact, 2.5 years ago that the support for the software that this runs on came to an end. There are, of course, other alternatives out there, a number of them that actually allow Flash software to continue working. So contrary to what this report sort of hints at, this isn't a situation where the software is going to simply fail to start running by itself, or at least nothing in the report indicates that. Moving on to the next section, it talks about the fact that the vice president of Covalent is the original developer of the software, and given his knowledge and experience in the software, he is in the best position to assess modernization options and implement the best option for this complex software. And in fact, I would say that is what raises a red flag, that when you've got somebody who says, oh, nobody else can design software as good as mine, that's a good time to go looking for a new developer. In fact, this is a $700,000 sole source contract award to develop software that other people do with a spreadsheet. And so granted, this Toronto Police needs something more than a spreadsheet. But to say that all of a sudden we need a almost $750,000 custom built application to take care of what other people are doing on a spreadsheet is simply ridiculous. Further, in this report, it goes on to discuss board's bylaw number 163, the purchasing bylaw, and section 15.1 of that talks about under what situations a non-competitive procurement may be undertaken. And the service offers to the board section G, which states that the need for that a sole source non-competitive procurement is permitted where, quote, the need for compatibility with goods or services previously acquired when there are no reasonable alternatives, substitutes, or accommodations, or there is a need to avoid violating warranties and guarantees. Obviously, the fact that this is replacing existing software, there are no warranties or guarantees that come into play. And the fact is, when you're saying that this is to write new software, obviously there is limitless alternatives to other suppliers that can write software. At a cost of $700,000, I would suggest that the service could, in fact, hire a full-time programmer and pay them for 2 or 3 years to develop this and a whole bunch of other software instead of paying some private firm who's friendly with the police departments. And I noticed Covalent's website mentions one of their vice presidents having gotten multiple acknowledgements and recommendations from chiefs of police So he, in fact, seems to be somebody who's fairly friendly with the policing industry. And here we are looking at a $750,000 sole source award without any quotation or any indication of what somebody else would charge for this software. I'd like to suggest that it's reasonable to assume that somebody else would do this for $50,000 or $100,000, not $700,000. And obviously, the fact that this isn't something that just Toronto Police deal with, this is actually software that multiple other police services in the province and across the country could use. So I'd like to suggest that the board deny this sole source procurement and request the normal process of getting multiple quotes undertaken.
Thank you for raising your concerns. I wonder, Chief, if either yourself or Deputy Dhaliwal can explain why, this particular type of software is actually niche and actually unique in the function that and why it is so expensive.
I can speak to that. So there's two aspects that I'll speak to in response to this item. Number one is the need for this technology, what it does for the service, the risks that it manages, and second, I'll speak to our approach in using this vendor, as well as what the longer-term approach is. You'll notice the timeline for this contract, of course, in the report. So first of all, the major case management and VI-class system essentially captures the information on the highest risk violent offenses that occur in the City of Toronto. This is high volume, and if you look nationally, there's no agency that's going to compare to the volume of occurrences of that nature that occur here, period. Not comparable. Second, from a technology perspective, in terms of managing this information, using it as an interface in between what TPS and our investigators use for their major case management investigations and operations, as well as our legislative requirements to report in Ontario to the power case and major case management systems, is absolutely necessary, period. The function of using something like Excel is just not an option for TPS, or even anything that's remotely close to that. This is a critical interface between multiple applications that also involves operational necessity. You can imagine how important it would be to capture consistent modus operandi in violent offenses and to know that that is captured robustly, that it's secure, that it's available, and that it works in those interfaces on an ongoing basis. In terms of the operations and actually having this tool working, this vendor has specialized knowledge, very specialized knowledge. It's unique because it doesn't exist elsewhere. And so this vendor is going to provide the service that allows TPS to address the risk that it might not operate, which is absolutely a risk. We're going to address that, and we're going to transition from this vendor very quickly to TPS IT staff to maintain this on an ongoing basis. And so there is, as a part of this work, the maintenance and transition from a knowledge transfer perspective to TPS in order to maintain it. I think it speaks for itself. The nature of these crimes absolutely touches on the service's goal towards community safety and well-being in Toronto.
And I take it that, when you decide who is the appropriate vendor, there's an RFQ put out to see vendors that can actually even meet this need, and B, there is a request for procurement in a fair and open process, and then the final vendor is chosen, based on the ability to deliver what the service needs, is the way I understand it.
Yeah, and I think, Madam Chair, I think so the difference here and why we didn't pursue a public procurement, which is our normal mode, is this is an existing vendor that already knows the software that we're now updating and refining. And so there's already previous knowledge because they already developed the current instance of it and understand our environment. So this is not net new solution that doesn't already exist. It's a significant change and an amendment to a project and to a software, but we already have it. And so that's why we're allowed to use sort of this non-competitive exception, because it's a vendor where we originally acquired the software from to begin with. And so that would be, I think, the nuance and maybe the clarification to the deputation. The other piece was just around the cost. We've been clear that it's up to $700,000 at the end of the day, this is a project with a project manager that is managing a vendor with contingency that is built in. What the board is providing from an authority standpoint is spend authority, recognizing that we internally still have to manage a project as diligently and efficiently as possible. So the expectation isn't that we will go up to this, but it at least allows us some room to now manage and work with our vendor in terms of scope and schedule and delivery.
Thank you. Are there any?
Just to make clear, Chair, the response has actually been no, they did not do a tendering process, and they're saying that this vendor has specialized knowledge, but in fact, that is not one of the conditions under which a sole source procurement is permitted under your bylaws and under the purchasing bylaw. And so this is not permitted to be a sole source procurement without having gone to tender. And $700,000 when the city's on the verge of bankruptcy and we're paying 10 to 15 times what something is worth because you've got a vendor that you like isn't the basis for doing procurements.
Deputy Dhaliwal, I mean, I thought you did answer the question, but...
Yeah, I don't, we did previously acquire goods from this vendor, which is why we now need to continue working with this vendor who we previously acquired goods from, because there is no reasonable alternative to this vendor to solve this big issue for us on a system we acquired from them.
But I take it originally, our IT systems are...
There's no other potential vendor if they haven't put it into RFP.
I think it's also noted in the report that this technology doesn't exist in other services in Ontario. So where we're seeing other agencies using things like Excel to track this, we have created customized technology for TPS, which supports this work. It's also become a critical interface for the organization as well. So that would be the basis. That we wouldn't be able to go to a vendor because other ones are not doing this precise work at TPS on a system which is already currently interfaced with other critical systems, including the provincial standard power case application.
But the reality is the quote says it has to rewrite the software because it's using a programming language that has been disabled and is no longer valid. And so the whole software has to be rewritten. Therefore, whoever's doing it is writing it from scratch, and nobody else is going to charge $700,000. That's why you do procurements and do quotes on these and do public quotations.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld, for your comments. Are there any other questions for Mr. Langenfeld or for the command team? Councillor Chang.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering, is the plan to update existing code or to rewrite the program?
It would essentially move it to a new platform, so a new software at the end of the day.
So it will be new software.
It will be new, using existing code, existing logic, which is what interfaces today and supports the investigation work.
So when it comes to code, sometimes old code piles up and then it actually makes things slower. So there's always, it's like a house, like you buy a house, it's an old house. Do you fix the old house or do you demolish it and build a new house? And I guess what I'm trying to understand is this a new house, entirely new, or we're like stripping it to the bones and then building on the bones that are already there? Has there been an assessment? Like, are there bugs that are there because it's old code that's piling up?
There will certainly be opportunities to improve, even just where technology exists today that didn't last year, for example. There will be opportunities. Additionally, I'm sure you've heard updates from the CIO previously around our shift towards platforms and the digital transformation that we're undertaking there. One of our largest technology strategies is to move towards using platforms, consistent platforms that are multi-purpose. So this will be part of one of those changes, shifting off what is today a single pipeline of technology, moving it onto a platform that has more opportunities for reusability and integration even more broadly. This will speak to other opportunities down the road as well.
And is this person well-versed in that platform? the new platform that is being established?
Yes, that assessment has been undertaken, and that will be the plan to apply that platform technology.
And has there been a jurisdictional scan? I know I read that there's nothing in Ontario, and although these are, provincial compliance requirements, but there are other high-volume police services out there, and how do they pull their data in a way that it can be analyzed? Are there other softwares or approaches that have been analyzed before making this decision to move forward with this vendor?
Yes, there are many opportunities from that perspective. However, with our steps on the RMS project, as well as this particular approach to addressing the major case management and VI-class systems, we've assessed, and this is an ideal approach, especially given that we know we're moving to a new RMS, and our obligations to use the information that's captured in this system to share with the provincial standard power case. That is a substantial driver for this work and is very logical strategically.
I believe Ms. Spencer has her hand up.
Yeah, great. Thank you for presenting the document in the way you have. I do fully support the recommendation here, because in an environment, I think number one, we have to look at integrating and advancing our technology. And based on samples that I've seen in different industries, the amount of money is not exorbitant. $700,000 is very much in line with what we're looking to do. And I think what we have to consider also is the complex nature of this particular type of installment. And you going with a supplier that already has the information is key, because I think time is the issue, and time can also, moving to a new supplier could cost a lot more money. But what I would like us to consider, so I fully support this, including, and when I look at the non-competitive procurement line, I think in organizations like this, we are going to have areas that we have to go to a supplier, a trusted supplier that we know that can deliver. And so this is stated here. But what I would like to maybe suggest and recommend is, as we go through this process, is to look at others over a longer term that could be a second or third source. Because the challenge with this type of initiative is that, if something went wrong with this particular supplier, then what, right? We don't imagine that that's the case, but I think it would be great to sort of, as we plan, is to look for a second or third source that we could at some point bring to the table in a competitive process.
Sorry, I wanted to ask our colleague if that would be a motion that you wanted to move to, that there would be a report back at some point on other technologies that exist to do this work?
Yes, that's yes, at some point in the future, but accepting the presentation as it is today.
Yeah, I think today we need to make a motion and second it and approve this. The reason this is so timely and so important is, if we all remember that Justice Gloria Epstein also, it was one of her recommendations in Missing and Missed, that one of the flaws in the Bruce McArthur investigation was simply the not user-friendly aspect of major case management, and so therefore I think, as you pointed out, that when the system, it's more than just having to use an existing member. It's a matter of public safety. So I think at a future time we can discuss, because I think those are good points. Are there, as time progresses in the industry, there may be other folks who can do this kind of work at this level that meets our needs. But at this time, I would ask that, can I have a motion?
Sorry, I have one more question.
Yeah, I will make that.
I
move that.
My last question. I have one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so my last question is AI part of this? Because we know that with reading volumes of data now, there are a lot of new technologies that can read that data for us and extract things that maybe human eyes cannot do so easily? Is that something that is being examined or part of this new package that's being built?
It's not necessarily part of the scope today. It is, as we would expect, an opportunity as we go forward. However, also, as you know, we have a service policy on use of AI technology, and so we would put that through the appropriate scrutiny and approvals if we were to consider applying it, and certainly in advance of actually doing so.
So is anybody considering it and examining it? Because I think technology is moving so quickly, and there are great opportunities for us to leverage these new tools towards even greater impact and efficiency.
Yeah, it's absolutely something we consider on an ongoing basis. Any new technology, we do look at those opportunities, but we also look for where it is applicable and appropriate. So I can say, yes, we are, and where it becomes applicable and useful from an efficiency, improving our ability to deliver community safety and well-being services, then we will definitely consider applying that, but following the policy in order to review it appropriately.
Thank you. I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you. So just to be clear, can I have a motion for the report from Chief DemQ for the contract award as it's in the materials that were distributed for this board meeting? Can I have a motion?
Yes, I will make, Chair, I will make that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. Seconder, Vice Chair Kostakis, all in favor? Thank you. And the next item is a report from Chief DemQ, the Environics Analytics, the contract increase, and I understand we have a deputation for Mr. Langenfeld.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Langenfeld. Thank you.
Thank you. So in this, Environics is, or the service is looking to approve Environics. Part of it is to purchase 5 additional software licenses for the Alteryx software at a cost of $39,000 per license per year. And so the question is, first of all, are 5 additional licenses required? It mentions in the report here, quote, anticipated these additional licenses will be used. So in other words, the service is saying in their report, they're not even sure that these licenses will be, in fact, be used. And at $37,000 plus per license, it's certainly wasteful if they're not actually requiring all of these licenses. The report doesn't, in fact, indicate how many previous licenses there were and what kind of an increase this is. Also, under that Alteryx software information that's available online, it highlights that this software, in fact, uses generative AI functionality. And so, but the reality is the services report here doesn't appear to have the requisite assessment in accordance with the board's policy use of artificial intelligence technology. So I assume that the functionality of this software, the AI functionality, would qualify as low-risk technology. However, that's the whole point of having the service provide that analysis in their reports to the boards, is to actually indicate whether or not AI is being used and what level of risk it presents, and that isn't part of this this submission here to the board. So on this report, first of all, again, here we are on almost another $700,000, another $662,000 on a report that part of that is $185,000 for licenses that even the services report says that they only anticipate that they will be used. They don't even confirm that they actually need these licenses. So unless those licenses are only sold in batches of 5, or the pricing differences makes it more beneficial to buy them that way, there's a question of whether or not that's even justified and whether there's any reason that can't be purchased at a later date if they're in fact needed. Again, these here we are, another $750,000 almost that we're getting quotes for more software. You've got in all your other in the budgets, for example, there's upgrades to the RMS and the time management system and the call system. We're rewriting the next generation 911 system. We've got the covalent bid. We've got this bid from EA. We're looking at literally hundreds of millions of dollars that the police service is spending on an annual basis on software. And I think most of the public, although we all understand software and computer technology is needed to operate any business, and that includes policing. And as a former software developer and programmer, I certainly understand the need for that and the implications. But the reality is that these reports don't provide any of the detail for anybody on the board to be able to say, oh, well, this is needed or this is a high priority thing. When that isn't stated in the report, the fact is that if a board member says that, they're just making that up on their own because it isn't coming from the services who are supposed to be saying they're the experts and know the requirements here. And in this case, as we're seeing with this embryonics, the case is where the report is actually saying that they're not certain they need what they're asking the board to approve the purchase of. I see the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. Deputy Dollywell, you were going to make a comment? Thank you.
I think just in the recognizing that we have a relatively new board, and so not everyone's always going to be familiar with our bylaw. There's the reason why what comes to the board primarily ends up being non-competitive purchases is because competitive purchases up to $1 million, we have kind of service authority to approve. We report annually on our non-competitive purchases. Out of $100 million of spend, 4% ends up being kind of single source, sole sourced. Of that 4%, half of it is proprietary arrangements, very specific licensing, warranties, things like that. The other half, so 2%, are things like scope extensions and some of the discussions we're having today. So I think just that context, I think, is important to understand of what routinely comes here is non-competitive purchases, 500,000 or more. So the threshold's actually relatively low. And what would also come to the table is any long-term agreement that's 5 years or more. So those are the types of things that certainly would come. And our bylaw is aligned with the City of Toronto's. We recently redid it. We worked very closely with the City of Toronto's, and so what you're hearing and the exceptions and things that we're laying out, it's very much aligned to the normal course that would happen with the city and sort of broader public sector guidelines. So I just think that context is important, and there's a reason why we are bringing forward kind of exceptions on a pretty regular basis.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve? Oh. Councillor Chang.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, how does the data that's being analyzed relate to response times?
I can respond to that. I'll give, I think, two real examples that I can touch on what we're doing with this request and maybe even touch on some of the deputants' questions. So what we're working on in this regard, it's an extension for professional services to a contract which was approved in November of 2022. This particular extension includes the work very deliberately on response times, calls for service data, and deployment that results from that. These are as a result of the AG's recommendations and related specifically to 911. And so the work that we're doing with Environics on this next year, over the next year for this contract extension, is going to assist the service in developing response time models, addressing data standards, and making a tool available to the service for the service to use on a continuous basis to discuss exactly those questions around response time, to be able to understand different approaches when things change, which as they do, when demand goes up for calls for service, when demand for different types of calls changes, the service needs absolutely the ability to understand what those impacts are from a resourcing perspective, for all of us to be able to understand the community safety and well-being impact of those changes, and being able to do so from an evidence-based perspective is critical. The software that we would use, that the deputant referred to, Alteryx, this is core analytics software these days. So what analysts would use to be able to take data from different places, run a model, and make that available to use to support those decisions. And so it's the combination of those things, the professional services from an expert group of data scientists at Environics, their professional services work, as well as the development of a tool which will include the software of Alteryx. Small note, deputant asked a question about the cost of that software. It's $38,000 for all 5 licenses per year. And that's so we don't run into a scenario where nobody can run that software or nobody can run the tool when we need to. In this day and age, we have lots of turnover and demand for analytics staff. And so we need ability to manage through multiple backups and teams that get developed and have knowledge transfer through to them so that we can support this type of work. This is critical to be able to use this type of information.
And those licenses are being paid for by grant, is that correct?
In part. So you'll see in the report that we've identified a number of sources of that funding, state of good repair, grant funding, and operational. So a combination.
Well, this is such an important subject. Response times is a piece of community safety that everyone has a high concern for. And I'm wondering, in this process, is there the opportunity to create a front-facing dashboard of what is happening with regard to our response time, so people can see how we're doing and maybe where there are gaps?
Great question. Chief, would you like to take this?
Well, listen, I think you raise an important point, and what you'll be seeing in the coming weeks is we're going to look to make available, particularly to counselors, on a ward-by-ward basis, an understanding of what's happening.
That's wonderful. Okay, I can't speak for everyone, but I love data, and so I'm grateful that that's going to be made available. And yeah, anywhere that's possible in employing dashboards to help people understand how something very complicated impacts their lives personally is very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chang. May I have a motion to approve item number 8, the contract increase for environment? 6. Oh, 6, sorry. Yes, thank you. Member Migliori, can I have a seconder? Vice Chair Kostakis. All in favor? Thank you. The next item is item number 7, the budget variance report to approve. Do we still have Mr. Langenfeld on the line? Because I believe he has a deputation.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just on the chief's comment there about reporting information to councillors, I just remind the chief and the board that, of course, the service answers to the board, and so any information should be sort of going to the board through these public meetings and then going out to councillors after that, but just ensuring that any information isn't simply going from the service to City Council and bypassing the board. Looking at the budget reports, of course, the other issue we keep coming up with and it relates to budget, or it's always the argument of why budget needs to increase, is the problems with response times that the Toronto Police Service has. And I point out that what seems to have gotten lost in the most recent iteration of the budget, basically Mr. Tory's last act here and the $50 million increase to policing, was the fact that, in fact, Toronto not only has some of the highest response times, but we also have the highest time on call at each individual call. the amount of time that our officers are actually spending there at the calls. And I would suggest to you that that is why we have such deplorable response times, is because we have officers spending 1 to 2 hours, all of the officers responding to a call, spending 1 to 2 hours there at a call, regardless of whether it's justified or not. I'd like to suggest that if you're looking to improve response times, you should be looking at an explanation and some evaluation and statistics and data on why exactly it is that our officers are spending so many hours at these calls, and looking at ways to reduce the amount of time, whether that's through improved technology or fixing what they're spending their time inputting data into the existing new systems, or what the issues are there, whether it's simply the method of dealing with other officers, communicating information, that by reducing the amount of time on call at each call, you can certainly reduce the response times and free up a lot of officer time. Looking at the budgets themselves, and again, thank you, Doobie, for committing to ensuring that the future budget numbers are coming out quicker. But I'd like to also ask that there, for future reports with the budget, and in this one, for example, where we're breaking out salaries and premium pay, we only classify uniformed officers and civilians. And in fact, Toronto Police, unlike many of the police forces that Toronto Police like to compare themselves to, a lot of our policing is done by civilians. And of course, some of those are TTC special constables and things of that nature that don't actually even fall under the Toronto Police budget. But we also see now where Toronto Police have a whole cadre of civilian special constables. So in fact, those fall under the budget of civilians, and they're reported as civilian costs, but in fact, they're not really doing civilian work. They're doing lower end police work, or what would have previously been qualified and classified as police work, but which is now done by civilians. So I'd like to ask that all the future budget reports here, when they're breaking out both for uniform officers and civilian officers, in all the categories here, salaries and premium pay, that they also break out and separate how much of those, how much of that work is actually administrative work and how much of that is policing work. And I think that would actually fall under both categories, that we have a whole class of uniformed officers that do administrative work, the chief's office and all the deputy chiefs and things of that nature that are involved in running the operations, versus frontline police officers that we have responding to calls. But then we also have very much that relates to the classification of civilian staff, and where we have special constables doing traffic duty, doing, we now have the sort of unspecified classification of special constables. And so I hope future reports will break out that information as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld, for those points, and we will be finding ways, as you said, to increase, efficiencies whereby there is time spent in areas that where we may use civilians to assist.
Watching potholes is not policing.
We have any questions for Mr. Langenfeld?
Oh, not for myself.
Councillor Chang, no?
I have questions for...
All right. Please, you have a question for the command team on this issue?
I do.
Thank you.
Just, extending what Mr. Langenfeld was speaking about, I believe there is a data framework being developed to track policing hours and type of work and how their policing hours are allocated. Is that correct?
I can speak to that. We are establishing an analytics framework is how I would describe that. And the approach that we're taking is to align that framework with the processes and services which TPS delivers to define whether they currently exist or do not yet exist, key performance indicators associated with those, and to use them for discussions like this.
That's wonderful. I love data. Is there an estimated timeline for that, when that framework would be launched or piloted and then able to report to us about it?
So I can say that it's underway, and in a number of ways you would have access to that today, even through use of the Public Safety Data Portal, for example, although perhaps less comprised as an analytics framework per se, but certainly using key performance indicators, updating in almost real-time information about calls for service, reported crime, other key policing activities, really in support of community safety and well-being in the city, that is available presently. And one of the first, maybe even the first of its nature in Canada for such a thing. And under the Chief's leadership, we've really emphasized pushing that further, and you will see in iterations more along those lines as well. Again, certainly as we continue to revolve around that community safety well-being approach, you'll see it refined and focused more in that lens, which would be a bit of a shift from where we are today. So it will continue down that path.
I think what has been requested by Mr. Langenfeld and others is a comprehensive breakdown of how policing hours are spent. So not so much the activities that are happening, but how they're allocated. And so we look forward to a data set in the future. I'm wondering about the variance report. It talks about that there is a 58 civilian strength that is not currently employed, and what is the impact on the service in not having these 58 people?
So I think, so like any sort of organization, there will be turnover. There will always be a natural, what we call kind of a gapping rate between what our approved strength is and who's actually sort of bums in seats in the chairs. When we are obviously short on resources, and you'll hear a little bit about this at our budget subcommittee as well, you will see a draw then on premium pay as an example. And so we do see that 911 is a good example where we certainly have a certain strength. We're not at our approved strength, and so we have seen an uptick in premium pay. Special constables with courts opening, we have, I think, 80 some vacancies in courts. There is a draw then on callbacks and on premium pay as a result of that. And then, yes, there is also sort of a general, I think, fatigue that certainly sets in. Our hiring this year has been largely on track. We used to have a 15% gap. We have now shrunk that gap to the huge credit of our HR and talent acquisition team. And so we continue to chip away at and prioritize who we need to hire. The other benefit we have is some of our civilian and cadet classes, they're hired in large classes. And so there's a dip sometimes in terms of approved strength, but then there will be sort of a dramatic rise because all of a sudden, 120 or 150 cadets are now deployed, or comm operators we deploy in batches of 24. So it does ebb and flow in the year.
Thanks. As many people are aware, premium pay is part of the budget, and we have, I think, 23 million overage for this report. And I'm just wondering, what are the key drivers of this overage of premium pay?
So historically, premium pay is one of those accounts that is always underfunded at the beginning of the year. It's one of the balancing actions we use to get to a budget, taking into account city affordability. So there has not been a year where we don't start knowing in January we might be 10, 15, 20 million dollars underfunded on that one line. The goal of premium pay should be to cover for unplanned events and sometimes for court time. That's classically why premium pay would be used. As staffing over the years comes down, premium pay tends to then lean into sort of operational activities where you obviously would want full-time headcount. We are trying to always strike that balance between hiring and premium pay. The way our makeup is half of our premium pay is callbacks. So people that are off, in particular on the uniform side, that you have to call back to cover things like special events, like unpredictable moments. 25% of our premium pay is made up of court. So you must go to court and it's off duty, and so that's 25% of that. And then the other 25% is shift extension. So on the civilian side, I'm at 911, I was supposed to get off, and now we need them a little bit longer. And so that's the broad sort of makeup, 50%, 25%, 25. The key drivers this year that I would say are over and above what we typically manage. So we had TTC patrol in the beginning of the year. The Maple Leafs, I mean, go Raptors and go Maple Leafs, but we don't always plan for our sports teams to make it. And so that certainly has a cost. Special events alone, this summer, between now and the end of the year, it's going to be $6 million of just special events. That's a mix of pay duty, callbacks, and on duty. But the point is that in and of itself is a huge burn on resources that then necessitate us doing callbacks in other areas just to make sure that our special events in the city are safe. We also have projects, so on the special ops side, you know, carjackings, assaults, our hold-up unit remarkably is certainly up in terms of premium pay. On the civilian side, as I mentioned, 911, special constables, and then, you know, with digital evidence, with all the evidence management we now do, whether it's body worn or a crime scene text, there certainly is a bit of a backlog we're working through, and so there's quite a bit more than last year of overtime that's going towards just processing evidence and going through video.
So
Councillor Chang, I'm going to have to cut you off because we have Derek, another deputy, and these are questions of the command team and not of the deputy.
Oh, okay.
And I would like
Sorry, I missed that.
Derek, and thank you for your written submission, and he also has a oral submission to make.
Good questions. So that you make the memory of Councillor Carroll here proud. I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied in doing so as fraud. God bless His Majesty the King. Long live His Majesty the King. And if Miguel has ever led the corporate security T-shirt police down at City Hall to believe in any way that he is the surety for the person he has, then that would be a mistake. And then I ask the corporate security T-shirt police at City Hall to please forgive Miguel. So this is a budget item. It means you're spending our money, the public. So this is from Remmers versus Lipinski, 2000, Court of King's Bench of Alberta. Municipal funds are held in trust on behalf of the ratepayers and inhabitants. Those individuals who control the direction and use of those funds should carry the obligation of trustees in the discharge of their duties. Now, I realize that these two council members here have only been there for less than a year. But I've spoken before here, I think, and at City Hall, that the courts have said that the City of Toronto is a trust. The courts have said that municipal council members are trustees. I spoke here last month about 2014. The Toronto Police did an investigation of what duties are of municipal councillors. I do not want them getting sucked into the myth that I've constantly heard down there. Senior members of City Council lying to the public that we can't ask questions at those meetings. Because you in law school took a trust law course at some point. One of the duties of a trustee is full disclosure of information, of a material fact, and the idea that they're down there spending our money. And they have the nerve, after they go around every 4 years begging us to vote for them, to get back into office, to get a job, living off of our money from paying property taxes, that we can't ask questions. No, that can't go on anymore. So actually, Councillor Pasternak brought up a good point at the City Council meeting Miguel was kicked out of. And he simply said, why can't we just go take the federal government to court to follow through on that promise of the $1.5 billion COVID lockdown bailout that they promised? So this is from an article by Lane Harrison from CBC News, posted April 3rd, 2023. As you know, I have expressed my disappointment in the federal budget because it failed to include promised funding for our COVID-19 costs, Deputy Mayor McKelvey wrote to Freeland on Monday. In a letter responding to the city, the Liberals said they have done whatever it takes to get Canadians through the pandemic and said they could do more. The letter provided to CBC News by the city is dated September 9th, 2021, and signed by the Prime Minister. And as Scott Duncan always says, anything you sign, you automatically become surety for. Canadians and communities requiring additional support from the federal government can trust that a re-elected Liberal government will deliver that support, the letter states. Now, being a former Crown prosecutor, you're going to appreciate this, Chair Morgan. This is from R versus Badger, 1996. The Supreme Court of Canada said, "The honor of the Crown is at stake. The Crown must be assumed to intend to fulfill its promises. No appearance of sharp dealing will be sanctioned. It is always assumed that the Crown intends to fulfill its promises. No appearance of sharp dealing will be sanctioned." Pretty much the same thing there. The Crown's honor requires the court to assume that the Crown intended to fulfill its promises. These two city council members here, now after what they've just learned today, can play the hero for everyone in Toronto. Go back to City Hall, tell Mayor Chow that we just learned that not only do the court get to, will enforce promises, but that they expect the Crown have always intended to fulfill their promises. And yeah, because I don't think people realize that nobody last term at City Hall Council even had the common sense to ask Dr. Davila at any point, what evidence is there that lockdowns are based on science? And hopefully, since she's also a member of the Board of Health, Deputy Mayor Morley will ask her that question at some point.
Thank you, Derek. Were there any questions for Derek? And any further questions on items 7.1 to 4?
Okay, so just back to premium pay. I'm wondering, you know, I always hear how hard it is to have a full complement because of the difficulties in recruiting and the training timelines. And I'm wondering, you know, if we had a full complement, which parts of premium pay would actually be reduced? Like, because from my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it really wouldn't impact court attendance having a full complement because there are scheduling issues there. Then extended tours, again, maybe a full complement wouldn't actually decrease premium pay use because that's just part of the job. And so would it only be in the area of callbacks that we could avoid paying premium pay?
So on the civilian side in particular, where it's primarily staffing and workload driven, you know, as long as we continue maintaining our hiring plan and reach our established strength, we can expect a marginal decrease on that because we'll actually have the team. But on the uniform side, just as a recap, what was approved in the 2023 budget was to get to net plus 200 by the end of the year. We are on track for that for the end of the year. We're not there yet. But what that was intended to do was to maintain current service levels, which is, as we have spoken about before, 20, sometimes north of 20-minute response time. So for us, full complement is just to maintain what we're doing now. That doesn't mean we will then anticipate a reduction in some very mandatory premium pay. Maybe a little bit on callbacks, but at this point it would be too early to gauge because we are just trying to maintain and tread water on service levels as they are right now.
I just do need to add a little more context because there's maintaining current service levels, and then there's the necessity for us to actually build capacity to actually deal with our our core service delivery. And just by way of context, a lot of the callbacks, for example, are supervisors. We are right now 140 sergeants vacant. There's 40 staff sergeant vacancies. That really translates to, I'd like to just, highlight this. If we were to staff up and do a promotional process, we'd have no net new in frontline policing. Virtually, we would eliminate the entire hiring benefit of the past calendar year. So these are pressures that are going to continue into 24, 25, 26, that we will be presenting to the board what an adequate and effective type of policing looks like in the context of our multi-year efforts to rebuild our core service delivery. So you are seeing premium pay in a number of areas. Court may go up as more radio calls come in. As this city grows, as this city continues to exponentially expand, there will be service draws that will lead to areas where we end up charging people in different circumstances that may lead to courts. As the courts staff up and improve their capacity, which you've probably read about recently, you will see that we will get called to court more frequently. So there's a number of places where premium pay may go up and down over time. But the reality is we are in a multi-year rebuilding of our capacity, frankly, and we are, as I said, 180 frontline supervisors, 140 sergeants, 40 staff sergeants short, which is something that you're seeing in these callbacks. So we can have some element of supervision. We heard deputations about time on radio calls. 100% we look at that. We need supervision on the road. We need sergeants to go out and help manage scenes. This is a complex city with complex needs, complex crime scenes, complex events. We need that supervision. But this is the deficits we're dealing with in people that translate into the premium pay. So it's just not linear that staff up and this goes away. Right. Some will, some won't, ebb and flow. The other last thing I'll say, Chair, is we are in a shifts pilot across the city. That requires a certain level of staffing in order to make sure the pilot is successfully implemented for proper evaluation. Therein is another driver that I think is an important one to highlight for us as the service for the board is as we evolve our shift patterns to be more efficient and effective in how we deploy our people, we need people there to actually test it and make sure it's going to work for us. And when you're short, you do need to call people in for that.
Thank you. So just to clarify, so even if we were to get to full complement, that would be a lot of new hires, and you'd still have to have enough people to actually promote to those key roles. So you're into almost 200, 147 plus 40, missing senior role officers that are impacting the premium pay. And then, so in order to, and I look forward to the budget journey with you all, to get to that complement of sufficient supervisors and sufficient incoming new officers, even with that model, it seems to me that, the way court attendance is scheduled and the way that extended tours of duty happen, that premium pay is just a part of how officers are paid for the work that they do.
100%. The notion of, and I think if I follow the line of thinking right through, the idea that we'd eliminate premium pay one day, in a dynamic city that we live in, with all the complexities and draws on community safety needs, that's impossible. Premium pay is something that will always happen. Court is scheduled on a court calendar. Our officers work shifts. Inevitably, they're going to go to court off duty. I'll highlight there's also events happen in the city that are unpredictable and unplanned. And we can do all the forecasting on known special events. Even when we do that, they change in scope and scale, as they did this year. A number of special events, historic ones, expanded in size geographically, creating a unique draw on resources. Those are known, repeat historic events. Then, of course, we have the unplanned. We saw protests in parks not very long ago that, had some dynamics to them that required a resource draw that we could not have forecast. That was impossible. Geopolitical events happen in this world. The beautiful part of a diverse city is you feel those events in our city. And sometimes those events create an environment that draws police resources that we cannot predict. So premium pay is something that's absolutely essential for our operational capacity to deliver adequate, effective policing.
The other thing I'll add is we are still chasing growth, meaning we are not staffed in January to accommodate whatever that growth in calls is going to be in that year. So this year, as an example, our calls for service are up like 15%. I think the emergency ones are up almost 20%. What we staffed for and the budget we put forward is based on what we know last year. That growth factor and the ability to sort of front-end staff to accommodate growth, we're not there yet. So we're constantly chasing our staffing levels, and each year, and you'll hear it in the budget request this year, there is a requirement to continue to try and meet or overcome and chip away at response times, in part through hiring.
Thanks. I just have one more question. With regard to grants, I noticed there's an underspend in the grant received for guns and gangs. So, and I'm just wondering, if we were given this amount, why we didn't spend it all?
So it might just be, so our fiscal is January to December, the province's is to March. So this is primarily a timing thing. We actually are very efficient about using our grants, but the timing between fiscals is why you might see some variances from time to time.
And perhaps just a brief summary of what is the work that is funded in the area of guns and gangs, that would be helpful.
Chair, might I suggest that's a significantly bigger discussion?
Sure.
It's a very, very large operation of police and other agencies, including prosecutors, but maybe at a different time if you want more information on
sorry,
those
I meant
materials.
with regard to the grant, like what it was applied towards.
And I meant in regards to the grant.
Okay, thank you.
All right, may I have a motion to receive items 7.1 through 7.4? Thank you, Deputy Morley. Can I have a seconder? Vice Chair Kostakis, all in favor? Thank you. We move to number 8 now, which is a report from Dr. Kanengisser to receive regarding the City Council decision CC 8.2 declaring gender-based violence and intimate partner violence an epidemic in Toronto, and the companion review of City of Toronto guiding principles for executive compensation policies at city agencies and corporations. And I understand, Councillor Cheng, you had a question.
The declaration of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence as an epidemic is very important. And I'm just wondering what might be some next steps with regard to our police services in reflecting this declaration and how we can better serve women who are at risk in our city.
I'm going to open up the response to that, Councillor, and then I'll turn it over to Deputy Dhaliwal for a little more expansion. I think it's important to note, Chair, that the Toronto Police Service, who are on the frontline response to these incredibly impactful and difficult circumstances, have long been invested in a victim-centered approach for a very long time. It is our priority. It has been. It is actually our sworn priority. But I will tell you, just from a human perspective, it's our officers who stand in those living rooms, in those kitchens, in those bedrooms. It's our officers who have to intervene under the most difficult circumstances. So we've been long invested in focusing our efforts to make sure we have the best possible victim-centered approach. And I'll pass it to the deputy with this final comment, is the partnership we have with victim services that is, quite frankly, a capacity multiplier time and time again, particularly in these circumstances. Because what it really does is allows our frontline officers to make a horribly unsafe environment safe. They're able to hopefully bring the right people to justice quickly. But then we have a resource to call in to help make sure our victim-centered approach is comprehensive and that people who are impacted by these types of horrible events receive the best possible care under what are obviously and clearly the most horrible and difficult times in their lives. So with that, I'll turn it over to CEO Dhaliwal to talk a little more about the training and efforts we have in this space.
So I've said it, I think, on more than one occasion. I really do believe Toronto Police is one of the best trained services in the world, and that relates even in terms of intimate partner violence. So we have a number of courses that certainly touch on this for our officers, and what informs our partners that actually inform this are partners like MAG, Children's Aid, Toronto Victim Services, the Women's College, and so they certainly work very collaboratively with us in the college to make sure that the curriculum and the content, and even will come and speak to our officers in various courses. So it is informed, I think, with sort of a broad set of stakeholders. We have a specific course just on intimate partner violence, but we also incorporate this in sort of in our ISTP when we go through our simulations. We have dynamic simulations specifically on whether it's a domestic assault and so on. And so, and we also have a human trafficking course. So there's flavors of this that we have embedded across a number of our courses, and the content and what we're supposed to be teaching is informed by stakeholders that obviously understand the current and understand what we should be teaching. And so that is continually refreshed annually.
That's great.
Can I just add one last comment, Chair? And it is to commend actually the motion, because I think, we do all kinds of very specific work. We do very, as I said, a victim-centered approach. But I think what also is important is for awareness for the community at large. So while we have a role to play, the board does and councillors do, we need this message in every living room in this city. And I commend the council for bringing that forward to create that type of awareness.
Thank you. And just, we've been working with the mayor's office to gather a group of stakeholders, frontline working agencies like the Schleifer Clinic, YWCA, Native Women's Resource Center, and hoping for future opportunities to bring their voices also to the engagement of shaping future evolutions of our training here at Police Services.
Vice Chair, sorry, Chief, did
you have my commitment that we will ensure that our domestic violence coordinators will meet with the groups you pulled together, and we very much welcome that opportunity. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Lisa, you had a question.
And it's, I think it's a question, but also if the city can also talk to a group of us just offline, I guess, to increase that list, because what we're also finding, and you probably have seen it too, the surprising amount of young people who are in grade schools and junior high and high school that are going through abuse within their relationships, and I know it shocks people in these days, and I've worked with abused women and children, but other, not just women and children, all populations and all genders when it comes to intimate partner abuse for many, many years. The legal system obviously has improved when it was up to the person who was victimized to report it only and could only be charged. So I'm very happy to see that those laws are changing. But the more that we can do moving forward from all stakeholders, like the Chief says as well, in the education piece, and I think when we do our reach outs to the partners that are on the list, that we don't just go to these big names, that there are larger entities that are citywide, but provincial-wide, but national-wide, because it needs to be a national message too. And the education piece that perhaps we can speak offline on in including the smaller grassroots organizations as well that are in the various stakeholders, but also the neighborhoods, not just the community, because there's a difference between community and neighborhoods, as we know. When I worked in Etobicoke as well, one street makes a difference. But it's also getting the preventative pieces and the education and the sources that are out there, and not just empowering, I don't like, but also encouraging and giving people that opportunity and the knowledge to be brave enough to come out even at younger ages and what's norm and what's not, because the cycle continues and it's evolution, it's cultural, it's whatnot, and our city changes every day. And I think it's important not to just name the bigger names and to include our community members and leaders within our communities, and not just the leaders, but the people who do not have that voice or cannot express that voice, and it has to be done in different ways. So that's just sort of food for thought.
Just to respond there, the city will be supporting a group of organizations that include smaller and larger ones to convene a larger roundtable that will also welcome Toronto Police Services at that greater roundtable to ensure that we have all the representation of the diversity of voices, including the different departments within the city that are working to make sure that we are not siloed, right? It's a big problem, and we should work collaboratively to strengthen our work. So I look forward to offline conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's also when we go into our schools, when we go in that a lot of our most vulnerable populations, and especially when our youth and our younger people are in the trafficking, do not go to school and are not in those places that we're speaking with as well.
Deputy Mayor Morley, you had a question?
Just a quick comment to add my voice on this issue, and thanks to my colleague and, of course, Mayor Chow for her leadership in this area. I think, Lisa, you bring up a really important point. This is such a challenging situation to get ahead of, and not only is there the impact for the victims, but also oftentimes ripple effects with children in the household and other things of that nature. I just want to commend the organizations that Councillor Cheng mentioned, and also I know in my community, Women's Habitat does a lot of important work, and it to me speaks to the importance of the collaborative nature with which we address these issues. Of course, once we have our brave men and women in the police service who can intervene and hopefully apprehend and or kind of interrupt these kinds of cycles, we know the challenges that exist for women and other folks in these circumstances, especially when they have children and other complicating factors, to be safe outside of those situations and to sort of build a strong foundation. And it requires wraparound supports, it requires leadership, it requires supportive legislation. And so I think it's just really encouraging for me personally, and I know for many members of the community, to know that this is an issue that we're all taking up and we're working really hard together, including with, of course, our invaluable service agencies on the ground and in community. So I just wanted to thank the Chief for his comments and to the board for the leadership here.
Thank you for all your questions and comments. So may I have a motion to approve agenda item? Councillor Chang, seconded by Deputy Mayor Morley. All in favor? Thank you. Now we move to item number 9, which is a report from Chief Demkew. It's the Special Constable appointments and reappointments year-to-date September 2023. Miguel, I believe you have a deputation.
You don't need to say the full last names. Complicated.
I don't think I said your last name, actually.
Thank you. So I circulated via the board secretary my deputation in writing. And I forgot to include one that is super important for this report of the Toronto Community Housing Special Constables. This memo was submitted in the year 2013 when we were discussing the body-worn cameras for Toronto police officers, because as the community, as the people, as the Indigenous, as the Black people, we were sick and tired of hearing that every time we go make a complaint about the police is that the return saying that we investigate ourselves, as it says right here, and we found we did nothing wrong. So what happened is in 2014, you started with a pilot project for body-worn cameras, which has been implemented fully in 2020. I'm going to read to you from your website frequent asked questions. It says, with regards body-worn cameras, Why is the service giving body-worn cameras to its police officers? Body-worn cameras provide an unbiased, independent account of police community interactions. They are an investment in the Toronto Police Service's commitment to delivering accountable and transparent policing services, whether they are used to legitimize an engagement between an officer and a member of the public, provide evidence in court, or offer an unbiased alternative to allegations of misconduct. Every frontline officer will be equipped with a body-worn camera. So, in my deputation, the documentation that I circulated, there is Mr. Alan Britton, who is getting his certification renewed today. Who's the one who produced this letter? Is the Community Safety Unit Officer Director. How is it possible that many things in my complaint that came first to the service and then when sent back to Toronto Community Housing Special Community Safety Unit Office says, you admitted many points that I make in my complaint. For instance, I have been the longest activist of police accountability in Regent Park. I created and co-founded Toronto Cat Watch to keep Toronto police accountable. Eight community safety unit officers came to 220 Oak Street on July the 4th to arrest me. In the process of getting, coming to me, I removed my camera of my pocket, which is this camera, similar to this one, phone, and they hold my hand, avoiding me from recording my arrest. That was assault. And the report says, we thoroughly investigated this incident, Miguel. Nothing happened. Just like in the memo, we investigate ourselves and nothing happened, right? So, again, I'm going to post it again. See, this is the old story of the Toronto Police. Has to be changed moving forward. And I hope, Olivia Chow, you are listening to this deputation of mine, because I also requested my human rights accommodations. I needed to have a personal support person during my arrest, and it was denied. And again, the letter says, Miguel, we completed the investigation, and we find it is totally substantiated, my complaint. So without the evidence of video of those 8 constables, special constables, how can you come to this conclusion? How can you omit some truths, some facts, which I'm here to explain to you people? Sorry, members of the board. Because you have to understand, we spend thousands of dollars in litigation. Cameras allow us to have an opportunity to discover who is telling the truth or who is making up stories. In this case, Alan Britton is making up stories in explaining and apologizing for the members of his unit. Sergeant Kerr, I believe he's here, he will come and talk to me, everything is fine, Miguel. We investigated ourselves and nothing was wrong. We need to move forward. And I want to continue to encourage Councillor Morley and Councillor Lily Chang to speak up and ask the questions they need to be asked, because it's important to discuss these important matters about budget. Watching potholes, which a lot of police officers are doing right now, watching construction sites, is not policing. It should be done by the public, by so many people who are dying. And my last comment is, what happened to the idea of a cafeteria at your bar that has been closed? I suggest to you guys to set up a social enterprise idea so we can get jobs for people who need jobs. Serving coffee here at police headquarters. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Any questions for Miguel?
Nick, you're there. Any questions, Nick? Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
May I have a motion to approve the report as it regards to special constable appointments up to September 2023? Nick made the motion, Lisa seconded it. All in favor? Thank you. And I believe the last item is a report from Dr. Kanengisser as it relates to, it's really a correction as it relates to language that was used in the special fund on audited statement. And Councillor Chang, you indicated earlier you had a question on that item.
Yeah, this has done some really important work in the community. We heard from Mediante earlier this year, and it was wonderful to hear the work. And I'm just wondering, it looks like, has our budget decreased overall over the last few years for these type of initiatives?
So just to clarify, the special fund doesn't have a budget. It's funds that are received through the service for stolen goods that where we can't find their owners and they are auctioned off, and proceeds such as those. And especially over the COVID period, these proceeds have substantially depleted, and we are now in a position where the special fund is nearing the red line, essentially. So we had to reduce our spending, at least until we ramp up auctions and those sources. And of course, the first purpose for the service is always to find the original owner rather than sell it and deposit the money into our account. So you know, it's once we have this money, it's for use for good purposes. But it's better if we don't have the money, because that means that people get their things back.
Right, so we either have more auctions, but that would be retrieving more lucrative items, or we find money that no one says is theirs.
That's right.
Is that correct? Well, I'm grateful that we have been able to support some very important activities in our city, and I'm not sure what to hope for now, because I want us to continue being able to fund these things, but I certainly, don't want us to encourage crime that results in this money. So, but great to know that we use as much as we can to invest in the community. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Chang, and those are all good points. And we're trying to be very creative in seeing how we can support these organizations, like by thinking outside the box and maybe getting other sponsors who might be able to come forward. Because, for example, as you remember, with the Beyond the Blue, we had to half what we normally would have given. So there are some very good organizations, but we are trying and hoping the reserves will go back up, but also trying to think creatively of how we can help these organizations to thrive. So thank you for your comment. May I have a motion then to receive report item number 10? Lisa, seconded by Nick. Was that your hand up? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And I believe that completes our items. Our next board meeting will be on Thursday, October the 19th. And just to remind everyone, there is a meeting of the Budget Subcommittee on September 25th at 10 o'clock for members of the public who wish to attend. And can I have a motion to adjourn? Lisa? This board meeting is adjourned till October 19th. Second. I did. Oh, not to adjourn the meeting. You don't need a seconder. No, you don't. No, we never do. Not to adjourn. We do for any other motion, I think.
Yes, it's our biggest.
Yeah.